introduce the concept like this equation del f by del t plus Vg gradient of f equal to df by dt. So there was a scattering term. So the left hand side was like a drift. So like a particle would drift, and the right hand side was like which would bring it to the equilibrium. Like so, it would try to restore the equilibrium. And this f function was dependent on seven variables like one time, three space, and three wave vectors we had defined. So then after that, we started discussing the Monte Carlo solution technique to that. And there was a several steps. Like first we had to specify what were the initial conditions. So in the initial condition part, like we discussed like how many number of phonons would be there. So what we found was number of phonons were actually quite large in number. So we had to reduce their number by finding some effective factor like whatever we could simulate. So the number of phonons came out to be order of 10 to the power 22, 10 to the power 23. Of course, we can't simulate that many. So we decided, okay, we would go with 10 to the power 6 or 7. So we found equivalent factor like which we multiplied. So after number of phonons, we tried to figure out where the phonons like a phonon bundle would generate. Like we found out this position in 2 dimension, 3 dimension. We also thought about like where the which phonon frequency we should draw from. Like so, how we should draw the phonon frequency from. So we introduced this cumulative number density. So cumulative function or cumulative number density function, so that we could make a distribution from 0 to 1 and then draw a random number. Accordingly, we could find out the frequency. And then we talked about the polarization. So we introduced the polarization, like whether we should select LA mode, TA mode, or LO, TO, like depending on this. And then we initial condition, we talked about the wave vectors, how wave vector, like what should be the direction of the wave vectors. Of course, wave vector would come, the position would come because we know the omega. Like once we have drawn the frequency, the wave vector becomes defined, but the direction we could choose, like what would be its direction of emission, the direction of the wave vector. So after that, we talked about boundary conditions, like as we would talk about in any differential equation to solve. So boundary conditions, we talk about isothermal boundary conditions. We talk about adiabatic boundary conditions. So in the adiabatic, so in the adiabatic boundary condition, we spoke about this perfectly specular walls or diffusely specular walls. So after that, we came to the scattering part, like how the scattering should happen. So we had defined, so first the particle would drift. So after drift, we had to calculate this pseudo temperature. And after pseudo temperature, we describe some scattering processes like three phonon, two phonons, or like through impurities. So we talked about those processes. And then we took several examples actually. So we took a ballistic example, like how the ballistic heat transport would happen. We took an example in the diffusive limit. So these are two extreme limits. And diffusive limit is where the Fourier law is applicable. And we found Monte Carlo solution would also be very close to the diffusive. Monte Carlo solution is very close to the Fourier's law. And then we talked about some limits in between also, like quasi ballistic. So I was trying to give some intuition like what would happen, like if resistance changes through the boundary scattering or through impurity scattering or some higher number of like unclap processes, what would happen. So these are the kind of examples we discussed subsequently. So we would propagate, like, so the equation we discussed was this one, like, and we kind of found it's not energy conserved strictly, it's not energy conserved. So today we would extend this to the energy conserved part. Also, when you were solving, like if you remember in the 2D image, like there was quite a large error. The example we discussed, like, so we would try to reduce that error, like how we could go about it. So there is a variance reduced formulation. So we would talk about that today, variance reduced formulation. Also, to find out this pseudo temperature or the local temperature, we would say in today's class, we would define them. So for that, we needed all the particles to propagate simultaneously, which is not feasible on small computers. So we would kind of try to linearize the equation. Like, so linearize the form of this equation. And this is the overall, like after combining all of this is exactly what you're going to implement tomorrow, like in the code, so that you could get understanding of like how the non-Fourier equations are solved, like using this Monte Carlo approach, and how the Fourier part we did it last Sunday. So I think you have to still have to go in little bit detail because there were a lot of concepts we covered in 3 hours, and of course we can't repeat everything, but
Okay. Okay, sir. I will go through. Thank you, sir.
so recordings are available.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, so the next part we are so before starting today, like I want to little bit uh, give you some problem, like which tip, like using even online calculators you could try to see. So every time, if you remember, like when we were writing like the energy density or any other equation, like so we were writing this phonon occupation factor, which was given by e to the power h bar omega by kBt minus 1. And anytime we had to like let's say look for even the flux from, let's say, isothermal boundary, so that had these terms, like so d of omega, like n of omega was there, like this n was there, and then the density of states which we defined in the last class, which was there. So I want you to actually visualize this n, like what this n is. This is a phonon occupation factor. So basically it's telling like not all phonons are equally occupied at given temperature. So let's say there is a phonon energy is about 30 MeV. So let's say the phonon energy is about 30 MeV, and let's say temperature is 300 Kelvin. So compared to that, like let's say this is one scenario, and there is a phonon at, let's say, 5 MeV also. So both of them are not going to contribute equally to the internal energy or to the flux, like. So in what ratio they contribute, and that's what we want to understand. Like, so there is a difference, like this n introduces this mean occupation factor, introduces like how much this phonon would contribute compared to that. So of course it would depend on the explicit density of state, but let's assume density of state is constant throughout. So let's say if we say density of state versus omega is constant throughout, and we have to determine like what would be the contribution, let's say, to the heat flux or to the like the internal energy to the of these two phonon, like what would be the ratio. So basically we multiply n with the DOS. So DOS is constant. So what I want you to do is like look at the plot and tell me the ratio. Let's say maybe call it at for at t equal to 300 Kelvin. Like give me the ratio, like com comparatively, like of 10 MeV phonons and the phonons at, let's say, 30 MeV. What would be their relative contribution, assuming the DOS is exactly same? So we want to see like how much this, because of the factor n, this occupation factor, like what changes does it make? Like what is their relative contribution to the total quantity, let's say internal energy or like flux? So that's the question. Like, so like I'm giving you like about let's say 10-15 minutes. So first we are doing at constant temperature. So let's do that. At this temperature, 10 MeV phonon, ratio of the 10 MeV phonon compared to the 30 MeV phonon. Like what would be that ratio, their contribution? And assuming rest of the things are also same, like Vg is same for flux, For internal energy, you don't need anything, and DOS we already said like it's same, but we have to multiply by h bar omega also in the case of internal energy. So let's stick with the flux part, or just maybe just stick with the n times DOS part. What would be this ratio overall? Okay, so take about 15 minutes, and then we could discuss its solution. So try to spend some time in plotting and see if you could visualize, like, because not all phonons with different energy at given temperature contribute equally, like even if their DOS was same. So we want to understand what is that ratio, like how much contribution each particle like would make. That's our intention. So take 10-15 minutes, and then we discuss the solution. So did you get a chance to work on it? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So did you get chance to work on it? Like, did you get it what we were trying to do here?
Uh, sir,
Uh, Sir, in general, we can say that at this given temperature, the number of phonons of lower energy, like 10 MeV, will be greater than that of 30 MeV.
Right. Occupied level, yeah. The occupation factor, yeah. So were you able to find out the factor at 300 Kelvin?
So, I mean, a ratio of 10 to 30, or with how, sir? It is 30 to 10?
Right. Like 5 to 30.
Okay.
Or it is 10 to 30 also. Like, that's not a problem.
Okay. So, then it will be. So it comes around a factor of 3 times, sir, I think. If it is 10 to 30.
Yeah. So 10 to 30 MeV, what would be you're saying?
So the ratio may be around 3.1, like that. Is it
Okay,
so,
so
sir?
this is about 2.117,
Okay.
and like 30 MeV is about 0.45.
Mm.
So the division of those two would be approximately 2 point. It would be about 4.64.
4.64. Okay.
So that's the kind of a that you could think like just by the like at a given temperature, not all phonons are contributing equally just because they are not occupied. So they can't contribute. So if we go to higher temperature, so maybe just take another 2-3 minutes and repeat the same calculation at T equal to 1000 Kelvin and see what this factor becomes. Like this one was at 300 Kelvin. So repeat exactly the same thing at 1000 Kelvin. And what would this factor become? So if you calculate that number, that would come out to be roughly 3.38 or so. So now along the same lines, like so that we were looking at a particular temperature, how much different phonons would contribute. Just spend some time in looking at let's say the 10 MeV, but with different temperatures. So let's say we have a 10 MeV phonon and at different temperature, what would be its relative participation, like how much its contribution would increase. So you could multiply by so like 10 MeV and you could compare, let's say at 10 Kelvin or 300 Kelvin. Like what would be 10 MeV phonon do like at these two different temperatures? So you could try to see. So were you able to do this? Like, did you find out the ratio?
Sir, I think it is almost 50 times more at 300 than at 10.
Actually, it's even more. Like at 10, it's about
10.
9.1 to 110 to power minus 6. Like if you put it in this factor, like in this equation,
Okay,
and
not
at
taken exponent.
and in the 300 Kelvin, it's about 2.109. So if you divide it 10 by 300, it's quite less. But if you do the same with the let's say 200 by 300, then this ratio is about 1.271 divided by 2.109. So you could think now, like depending on the energy and temperature, like this occupation factor is different, and different phonons contribute differently. So that was the main motivation of walking you through this exercise. Okay, so I think we would start then today's lecture. Like, if you have any questions, let me know so far. Like, otherwise, we would get going. Okay, so the today's lecture is about this variance reduced linearized Boltzmann transport equation. So we would come to this term variance reduction, like what this means. Boltzmann transport equation we have already done. We would do today also the linearization form, and we will also do the energy conservation of this equation so that the energy is strictly conserved. Okay, so in the last class, we covered up to this point. So we are taking from this energy conservation formulation and just energy conservation formulation, and then we would proceed accordingly. Just give me one moment. Okay, so today we are talking about this energy conserved Boltzmann transport equation, and this then the deviational energy, which is just a variance reduction form of it, and then the deviational linearized form, like we would talk about. Okay, so in the last class, we talked about this equation, like where the scattering was from k prime state to k state. Like if both of this phi of k prime or phi of k prime k were going to be equal, then of course the scattering would be, it means the system has reached equilibrium, and this factor would become 0. So we could just rewrite it in a little bit different notation. So it's pretty much the same thing, like df by dt, the group velocity gradient of f. So this scattering part, we could write it as like f minus f local. So f local is basically the local temperature. So in the last class, we were talking about the scatterings, like how the so let's say within this cell, like how the temp particle came here, another particle could come from here to here. So how much the temperature of this part has changed. So we define this pseudo temperature. So this local temperature is a little bit different. We would define it in subsequently. But this local temperature, like the difference between the f minus this f local, like because that's what trying to bring it to equilibrium, and divided by the lifetime. So basically we are trying to denote this df by dt with the difference of f. So basically del f we are writing f minus f log, and dt we are writing with the lifetime of that. So this approximation, what we call is like where we assume this relaxation time. We call it relaxation time approximation. So basically, we have assumed some mean lifetime of a phonon, and according to that, like mean lifetime of a phonon, we would say we would write this equation f minus f log by tau of omega pt. So as I said, this F local, like at temperature we define it, it's slightly different than the pseudo temperature we defined in the last class, and we would come back to that point in a bit. But what we are doing essentially is writing this equation in the form of this equation, so nothing complicated. And I should mention, like, today's discussion is primarily from these two papers, so you could look up them. Also, I have provided some reading materials, so you look up there as well. So most of the discussion would be has been taken actually from these two papers, which actually pioneered this technique. Okay, so now coming back to the problem, like what we did in the last class. So I would just briefly cover it. So what we did was, like, we found like how many particles were there. So we were trying to initialize. So for particles, we found by the density of states, and with this factor f. So this f is just the same as n at equilibrium. So this f equilibrium is exactly same as the n. So we found out how many number of phonons were there in a particular volume. So when we took that example, like when we calculated this number for silicon at 80 Kelvin, if you remember, it came out to be 10 to the power 22 or something. Like, it was quite large number. So this n actual, or this n, we would call it 10 to the power 22, like approximately of that order. But the number of phonons we could deal practically is like 10 to the power 6 or 10 to the power 7. So we found this W to be of the order of some 10 to the power 15, some 10 to the power 16. So basically, we would apply this constant factor because we cannot treat that many particles, like that many phonons. So we would treat like, so equivalently some of these particles, and we would assume like one of the bundles. So basically, one bundle out of this 10 to the power 6, each bundle would have many phonons, and each one would correspond to the same characteristics, like the same frequency, group velocity, same wave vector, and so on. So after initializing, we did the advection step, or like drift, where this bundle I actually moved by this phonon bundle actually would move by this group velocity time delta t. So this was a very simple equation, like the new position of the particle at t plus delta t came out to be r of t plus group velocity times delta t. So basically, we are just moving to the new position. Okay, so here was the major difference which came, and here is the step you should pay attention to. So this is the sampling step, and we should carefully look at the variables here, because that would become critical for tomorrow's assignment, or like hands-on exercise. So there is a temperature T, and then the pseudo temperature, what we are also calling this T local. So how they are obtained? So in the last class, we equated this energy, like whatever this effective number of particles were there, and we knew in one particular cell how many phonons were there. Like, we summed over all the phonons, like whatever their energies and whatever the n effective was, and then we have to equate it with the equivalent equilibrium distribution. So density of states h bar omega and some temperature T, which we were calling in the last class the pseudo temperature. The T tilde, or pseudo temperature, we have to determine this. So by equating this energy of the particle, which we know, and equating it to this distribution, we could invert this equation to find this T. So basically, this T was same as the pseudo temperature we defined in the last class. Or what we could do, because if you remember, if you could see the distribution here has this factor of tau as well. So instead of finding, because if we take a mean temperature, like if we have to find the mean temperature, like we don't include the tau, then the distribution would be quite different. The value won't be quite accurate. So what we do is, so we compare the pseudo energy instead of the true energy. We compare the pseudo energy, which is essentially n effective h bar omega I, but we divided it by the particular tau as well. And by dividing it by tau, we could do the same thing on the right hand side as well. D of omega p h bar omega, tau omega pt. And then this temperature, by inverting, what we would find is the local temperature. So this local temperature is what we are going to use, like with respect to which we are going to bring the system to the equilibrium. So you should clearly distinguish between this local temperature and the pseudo temperature, or let's say just the temperature of the system. So is this step clear? Like what is the difference between this temperature and the pseudo temperature or this local temperature, and which temperature we are using? Because this is really, really critical to follow.
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Okay. So next we look at this part, like even this tau term contains this T. Like at what temperature we are taking this tau, as I was mentioning in the last class, if you remember. So in the last class, when we were looking at omega versus k curve, so I said, okay, there is phonons, and then we like made one line from, let's say, omega 1 to omega 2. So going from omega 1 to omega 2, like if we plot the intensity, so from omega 1 to omega 2. So if it's a harmonic system, then there was just this delta function wherever they intersect. That would be the intensity. But in reality, like this would have some kind of a distribution, and this half width, like full width at half maxima, would be inversely proportional to this lifetime tau. So this tau or full width half maxima is coming exactly because of higher order terms. So the harmonic approximation did, if we include higher order terms, this finite width would come. So basically the three phonon scattering, the Umklapp processes would give rise to this width, or electron phonon coupling, like the phonon scatter with the electrons, that would give rise to this width, or scattering with impurities, that would give rise to this finite width, or even the boundary would give rise to this finite width. So this tau was inversely proportional to this full width half maxima, but this tau would also change with the temperature, because as we just discussed, this Umklapp process, if we take, so as we said, like in this Umklapp processes, the energy has to be conserved, and the momentum, some part of the momentum was transferred to the lattice through this G vector. But if we let's say go at higher temperature, more and more phonons are occupied now. Their occupation factor changes. The exercise which we just did. If we go at the higher temperature, the more and more phonons would be occupied. So more and more probability of this happening, like this satisfaction of this equation would like both of these equation would be satisfied at higher temperature, even at a like even in more number. So what would happen with that case is this Umklapp scattering would start increasing. So Umklapp scattering leads to resistance. So basically, if scattering is happening more, there is a more resistance. Like so, the lifetime is less. So this width would become even larger. So the point is, as we increase the temperature, this full width half maximum is actually dependent on this temperature itself. Okay, so now coming back to our original point, like why we came here. So this tau is actually dependent on T, and the T at which we would take this tau is by comparing this energy. So that's how we would get this T. This T and T log are not same, so we should clearly differentiate it. Like if our system doesn't have much variation in temperature, let's say we are just varying from 299.9 to 300.1, so then probably it doesn't matter because properties won't change much within this range. But if we are doing let's say like large difference, maybe let's say 400 to 200 Kelvin, then this T and T log would be different, so it matters. So basically we should use for this tau this true, like the which is directly by comparing the energies, the temperature which comes out from there. Okay, so I think we have clearly defined now this pseudo energy, from where we get this local temperature, or what we are calling pseudo temperature, and by comparing directly the energy, we got the temperature here. Okay, so the next we came to this point, like where we said, okay, this phonon bundle like scattered with some probability pi, and as I said, the factor would come if you put this equal to 0, and if you solve the remaining equation, like you would get this probability function, and which essentially says like whatever the tau is, like, and the time step is, like it would tell you like if the phonon would scatter or not. So you could draw a random number and compare with this pi if it is more or less, and depending on that it would scatter. So in that step, the scattering would happen. Like, so this step would tell you if the scattering would happen or not. So after scattering, like once the scattering has happened, like we have to draw the new frequencies. Because if you remember, even in in-club processes, like the new particle is different from the initial particle. So we have to draw some new frequencies, and the frequencies would be drawn exactly following the same algorithm by making this cumulative number density function. So we would choose the frequency as we discussed in the last class, and we would choose the polarization, the LA mode, TO mode, and everything. And we would choose this wave vector direction also, or the traveling direction. So traveling direction in 3D was sine theta cos phi I cap, then sine theta sine psi j cap plus cos theta k cap. If you remember, like theta was the polar angle, psi was the azimuthal angle. So since this frequency dependent relaxation times are there, like so frequency we have to draw from this distribution d of omega p f log divided by the tau. Like so we would draw the frequencies, new frequencies from this distribution, because initial conditions we only use the distribution d of omega p and like f local. From here we drew like f local was pretty much same as in from the initial condition, like the f local was same as if we look T at 0, like it would be same as like equilibrium temperature. But in general, it would be different. So d of omega t times f log divided by tau. Like after scattering, we have to draw from this distribution. Okay, so like if we don't use energy conservation formulation, which is in this case, it is not energy conserving actually. So in that case, what would happen is like we have to add or delete particle until this energy difference approaches like this, like we have to keep adding or deleting the particles until we hit this target energy. So this target energy is like we are able to reach pretty much approximately. So that's what we had discussed in the last class, and that's what we were actually recapping. Okay, so now the step comes, like since the energy is not rigorously conserved, like what we could do is we have to make this equation such that we could conserve the energy rigorously, like so that we have to don't worry about adding and deleting particle and approximating the energy within this tolerance, but we want to conserve the energy like really strictly, like how this energy is conserved. Okay, so to do that, like what we could do is, so for the energy conservation part, we could multiply the entire equation by h bar omega tau. So h bar omega was our energy. So that's what we do. So we multiply by h bar omega. So basically, E would become then h bar omega f, which is written here. E log is just h bar omega f log. So you could see the entire equation is very become remains of the same form. So del E by del T. So f would become just multiplied by h bar omega. Vg times gradient of E, and then E log minus sign we have absorbed here, like so that's why this f log is become E log, f becomes E, and this tau remains tau as it is. Okay, so coming to this energy conservation formulation is not so challenging, but we have to look at how our distribution also changes with respect to that. So one more thing we should define is like what is the effective energy of each computational particle, or each of these bundle of particles, like what would be their effective energy. So this epsilon effective is n effective times h bar omega. So n effective is that number, if you remember, we divide 10 to the power 20 divide by 10 to the power 6. So how many effective particles we were considering and whatever their energy is. So all the particles like would have the same amount of energy. So all of these particles would carry the same effective energy. So when we draw the particles, like I mean, or like from the initial conditions or from the boundary, let's say isothermal boundary condition, or after a scattering event, like when the let's say 3 phonon scattering is happening. So the distribution function that we must account for this factor, like so for example, when initializing the equilibrium population of the particle at a temperature T. So let's say initially we took this factor, but now if we have to draw certain from a new function, like because we have took the energy conserved equation, so we have to multiply all our distribution by h bar omega as well. So we cannot draw from the previous distribution which we derived for f. So the distributions from which we are going to emit the particle like would also contain this h bar omega. So if there are such n such particles, like n such bundles, each bundle has energy, phonon bundle has energy of E effective times n. So that way we would get total energy to be n times epsilon effective. So in this case, the energy is exactly conserved. So there is no addition on or deletion of the particle is actually necessary. Okay, is this part clear so far? Like how we have conserved the energy?
Sir, sir, can you please? Hello.
Yes, I can hear you, Yogesh.
So actually, I'm not getting clearly how we are ensuring that energy is conserved.
So what we did was we multiplied the entire equation by h bar omega, right?
Right.
And each particle now would have the same energy. Epsilon effective is n effective times h bar omega. And each
Okay.
computational particle would have exactly the same energy. So basically, if one of the phonon gets scattered, let's say there is a 3 phonon scattering happening, phonon gets scattered, like we have taken out this much energy, right? And when we draw the
Yeah.
new particle, like same energy, because particle is different, like its omega is different, but the particle energy is exactly same.
Okay.
In the previous case, what was happening, like the particle with certain energy was coming, but when we were drawing the new particle, it had different energy because we were only worried about this omega.
Mm-hmm.
So then the energy was not conserved, like.
Yes, sir.
Or also we have to look at this mean temperature value. Like actually in this previous case, like it keeps fluctuating around that mean value, and it's not strictly conserved. Like in this case, we are strictly conserving the energy, so we don't have to worry about the energy part at all.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so this is a really interesting development which happened. Like the previous algorithm, if you remember, we were working like in the 2D problem. We took an example of 2D problem where 600, 500, 400, 300 Kelvin temperature was there. We solved it using Monte Carlo. We solved it using Fourier's law in the diffusive limit. And still there you could see the temperature difference of the two simulations were about 20 Kelvin or so. And if you look at from a perspective, like maybe this error is quite large. Like there should be a way we should be able to reduce this error. Of course, one way is to increase the number of particles. But if you keep increasing number of particles, the error would only go down as square root of n. So it's not going to be very fast. Let's say if you want to bring 20 to 10, you have to increase the number of particles by a factor of 4. So it's not going to help much. And the computational time would increase. So there was a new formulation like which was introduced. This new formulation which was introduced, and that would reduce the statistical uncertainty associated with this simulation like quite considerably. So let's look at the what is the principle behind that. Like first look at physically, and then we would explain this equation, what this equation means. Okay. So previously, like we were solving for, let's say, this E or F. So right now we have come to the energy conservation form, but F is also equivalent. So let's say that was our actual solution. We were after this E form, like which is given by this blue line, and we were sampling in the entire space. So this space was like really, really quite large, like where we were exploring. So this movements, like as it's written here, like the control variance methods are solving kinetic equation. The moment R of a given distribution F are computed by like writing this form. So what this form is telling us, like if we know the equilibrium distribution already, so let's say like our final solution has to be like this. Let me draw with maybe red color. So our final solution is given this, like it's the same as in the previous curve. But if we know what our equilibrium distribution is going to be, or we could approximate our equilibrium distribution by some number. So let's say our equilibrium distribution would be somewhere around here. So instead of solving for the entire domain, like or sampling the entire domain, what we could do is we could just sample this part, like which is deviating from the equilibrium distribution. But it would have positive and negative part, as you could say, like some part is below this equilibrium line, some part are above equilibrium line. So there is a concept of sign which would be introduced. But we have to only sample only this small part, and in this small part, like we could if we take the same amount of samples we took in this entire domain, if we took that same amount of sample, like our performance would go up really drastically. So that's what we call the control variate variance reduction method, control variate variance reduction method, or we call it deviational formulation. So what we are doing it, let's say we have to calculate any moment of certain function, this f or e, whatever that function is. So here we are taking f. So r times f times dx dc. So instead of solving for this moment directly, what we do is like we take r and we subtract from f this equilibrium distribution, f minus f equilibrium. And we have another term because we have subtracted this part, so we have to add this term again, r f equilibrium dx dc. So instead of solving everything stochastically or through Monte Carlo, so we only solve this part stochastically. Basically, whatever this black shaded area we have taken, the remaining difference from the equilibrium position, we solve it stochastically using Monte Carlo. And equilibrium distribution we already know, like this h bar omega by kbt minus 1. We already know this equilibrium distribution, so it is very easy to solve this part deterministically directly. So basically, we have reduced our big problem by taking this approach where we are solving from some equilibrium, like difference from the equilibrium position, and we have reduced our, for the same number of particles, we could reduce our uncertainty quite significantly. So that's what is written here. The first term on the right hand side is computed stochastically, and the second term is computed deterministically because we already know FEQ. Since we are only calculating this small term stochastically, so our performance increases. So the variance reduction, if the error was coming previously, let's say with 10 to the power 6 particles, if error was 20 Kelvin, with same number of particles, it would be like orders of magnitude. Even it could be 0.02 Kelvin or so. It depends on the system. How good is your equilibrium difference? So it would depend, like it would increase drastically this performance, this through this deviational formulation. So far we have done two parts. Like, so we were trying to improve our equation of Boltzmann transport equation so that computationally it becomes easier to handle. Like equation is still the same. We are just changing the form of equation so that it becomes easier to handle the equation computationally. So we made it energy conserved form, and now we defined a concept of deviational formulation. So is it clear so far what we have done?
So that means to say that we are looking into those area where the particles are very much near to attain the equilibrium.
That's not true. So basically, what we are doing is we have defined f is our unknown, right? Or in this case, e is our unknown. That's what we are after, right? And we don't know its true form. That's what we have to calculate. Like this is the orange curve is what we have to calculate. But what we are saying is like we could define some equilibrium temperature. So for example, let's say if you take a 1D rod, If I put a left hand at 303, right hand at 297, I could say maybe the equilibrium temperature of inside it is 300 Kelvin. Or maybe even if it's a shorter length, like even in this form, I could say maybe it's a linear distribution. The equilibrium temperature would be that. That's my just guess. We have to be as close to the final solution, which we don't know. So we said, okay, our equilibrium solution is somewhere here. So our final solution is not that far from here. So basically, where we have to sample the particles are here, like wherever it is deviating, right? So the particle could be above or below this equilibrium distribution, and we are only sampling those part. We are not sampling the entire distribution because this equilibrium part we already know deterministically. We know its form. So the only way we have to sample is this the remaining part, which is less. And so that that reduces our statistical uncertainty quite a bit.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so let's try to write it in a mathematical form now. Like how we would write. Okay, so now we are defining ED, this deviational particle. So previously we had F, so we write h bar omega F equal to E. So now, since we are subtracting this equilibrium part, so we are writing this deviational particle ED. In that form, we have to write equation, which is E minus E equilibrium T equilibrium. So basically, at a given temperature, we are writing through this equilibrium distribution, which we are going to subtract. Okay, so we would substitute E. So then the like E with ED. So we substituted E with ED here, del E by del T. So let's look at this term, this Vg gradient of T. So Vg gradient of ED. So if we expand it, Vg gradient of E minus E equilibrium T equilibrium. So we could write it as Vg gradient of E minus Vg gradient of E equilibrium T equilibrium. But previously we only had this one term, Vg gradient of E. So basically, if we are going from here to here, we have to make one further approximation. If we don't make this approximation, this term is in reality it is non-zero. So what we could do is we could assume our equilibrium distribution such that this gradient is zero. So basically, the example I was trying to give you. So let's say we assumed a one-dimensional rod like 303 and let's say 297 Kelvin. So we know, like in a Fourier solution form, like the temperature profile would be, so let's say this is 297, this is 303. So along the length, we know the temperature profile would be linear. But let's say we have reduced the length now, but we could still approximate this as a linear, like we could define our initial solution as of this form, like we could take corresponding to this equilibrium distribution. But this is a linear curve, like it is depending on the x, like this x-axis is depending. So if you look at Vg gradient of E equilibrium, T equilibrium. So if we do this gradient, this would have some constant. So basically we have to add some kind of a source term, like this constant which would come because it's a straight line you have assumed. So basically if we go back to our previous equation, if we take it to be linear, then this term is non-zero, and then we have to take into account this part. But what we could do is, like instead of taking it as a linear, so again the same profile. So instead of taking it as a linear, what we would do is we would say, okay, our equilibrium is at 300 exactly. Like our equilibrium distribution is about 300. So it's constant throughout the system. So if you take a derivative of it, it becomes zero. So basically, if we take E equilibrium at T equilibrium to be equal to zero, like, or basically we assume a constant temperature profile throughout, because E is just essentially h bar omega divided by e to the power h bar omega by kBt minus 1. So if we take this quantity to be temperature to be constant, then there is no differentiation with the x. Like this equation doesn't depend on x except for this T. If temperature is constant, we have taken this derivative would become 0, and the both this term would drop to 0, and we are left with only, so basically Vg gradient of Ed deviational particle becomes same as this. So basically that's the assumption we have made. The equilibrium distribution we are going to assume at T equilibrium. So T equilibrium would be constant. There would be no change in T equilibrium with the X position. Actually, we could take it to be linear. It becomes little bit because we would introduce then this constant term. At that constant term, we could treat it as a source term, and then we could again solve the equation. But that's little bit computationally challenging. But when we take periodic boundary condition, that's exactly we do. Okay, so then comes to the part of E lock. So E lock also we have to subtract this equilibrium term, E lock minus E equilibrium T equilibrium. And then we are left with E. E is just we have to subtract again. So this E would become ED. So basically our new equation, which we are going to solve, which would actually control this part only. So we are going to solve only this part using Monte Carlo or the stochastic sampling. So this part is going to be governed by this equation. Okay, so this deviational formulation, the mathematically is clear, and the extra assumption we have introduced in this equation. So this has to be clear. So we are going towards what we are going to do tomorrow in the hands-on exercise. We are going slowly towards that equation which we are going to solve. So we have already done the energy conservation, and we have made it equation in the form of a deviational particle. So few things about this part. So choosing the equilibrium state at temperature T equilibrium from which deviation will be simulated. So we have to choose this T equilibrium part. As I said, we have to choose it to be constant. Otherwise, the source term would be introduced. And as you could already see, closer we are to the equilibrium state already. So the approximation we made for the equilibrium temperature or equilibrium state, the smaller number of deviational particles would be required for a statistical uncertainty. The closer we are to the final solution, the approximation we make, the closer we would be like. So basically, less number of particles would give you the good statistical uncertainty. And in some cases, we could also take the equilibrium state to be same as the initial state. So in that case, the initialization, if we do, so whatever T equilibrium state we have taken, and if T and T equilibrium are same, then the initialization step, like we cannot draw the particle from there. The particle could only come from the boundary. But let's say this T and T equilibrium are different. If T is greater than T equilibrium, then this term would be positive. So we call it a positive particle. And if T is less than T equilibrium, then the particle would be negative. So basically from the distribution we have to draw. So previously we were only drawing from h bar omega d of omega p divided by e to the power h bar omega kbt minus 1. But now we have to subtract this equilibrium distribution from the distribution from where we have to draw the particles. Okay, so after subtracting, we would have now these positive particles or the negative particles. Is this part clear? I'm going a little bit slow today because these are the concepts which we have to implement tomorrow, and it's not going to be trivial. So I would go over the code a little bit with you. So that's why I want to make sure like you're understanding each and every step, because that's what is going to be implemented in the algorithm also. Okay, I'm assuming you guys have understood what we are talking about. Okay, so again, the steps would remain same. So the equation looks pretty familiar like what we did last time, except like this part looks a little bit different, but it's again of the same form. So again, we put the right hand side equal to 0. Like basically we do the drift step or the advection step. particle would still move like this deviational particle, the energy conserved deviational particle would still move by Vgi delta t. So R of t plus delta t would be equal to R of t Vg times delta t. So that thing does not change at all. So what changes is this sampling step, like, and it becomes really trivially simple. So Cj is the set of indices corresponding to the particle inside cell J of volume Vj at time t. So what we are essentially saying, so let's say this is our cell J, and the volume of this cell is Vj, and we are at a time, some particular time t. So each particle is essentially of the same energy. There is nothing different about each particle. And there could be many such computational particle here, like not necessarily it would be one, it could be thousands, or because we are taking 10 to the power 6 particles. So at a time, there could be many particles in this cell. And each one of them is carrying exactly the same amount of energy, epsilon D effective. So now to find out what is the deviational energy change, like, so basically we have to worry only about the sign of the particle, because each of them is carrying the same amount of energy exactly. So we have to just sum up, like, how many particles are there with the positive sign and how many are there with the negative sign. So S just denotes sign, plus or minus. So we count our number of particles with the positive sign, we count our number of particles with the negative sign. So basically positive negative would cancel out, whatever the difference would be, that is our energy within the given cell. So that's how we would sample, like, so this becomes really trivial compared to the previously, like when the energy was not conserved, like it becomes a little bit tricky step because of addition and deletion also later on. But here it's really simple, just we have to keep track of positive particles and the negative particles. Okay, so then this part is okay. So if you remember in the sampling step, we did this pseudo energy also, like where we have to find out the pseudo temperature or the local temperature. And local temperature, since the scattering time was dependent on frequencies also, like, so we had to take the pseudo energy. So pseudo energy, we had to divide it by this tau. So again, we would define exactly the same way, pseudo energy. So delta of E of bar of J. So epsilon D of effective. So SI divided by tau of omega I Pi by Tj. And I belongs to Cj. Basically, we are covering all such cells. Like all the cells are taken care of. So of course, then we could compare the energy. So this, if we compare the directly this energy delta Ej in a volume Vj, and we could find out this temperature because we already know the T equilibrium. So we have only subtracted this part. For pseudo energy, delta E bar J, we have to divide it by this tau term, and we could get our local temperature also. So one thing you might be noticing already, what is the problem with this formulation is, like, technically there is no problem, but computationally you could see, to find out this local temperature, like we need to know what is this number of positive and negative particles are there. Like let's say we are considering about this cell. So basically we are taking 10 to the power 6 particles. Like in the beginning, let's say there were 10 to the power 6 particles. So we have to propagate all of these particles simultaneously. And at a certain time t, we need to know how many particles are there in this box, like, or in this cell. And then we have to count positive and negative particles. So basically, one of the things comes out to calculate this T local, which is like really essential to calculate, and which is coming from our requirement to calculate delta Ej. Like we need to propagate all of these particles simultaneously. And this is the limitation, like why we can't propagate one particle at a time. This we would overcome through the linearization problem. But there are few more approximation we have to introduce there, like few more assumptions we have to make there, so that we get rid of this part, like so that we don't have to calculate this T log part, like this local temperature. So this is a delta EJ over VJ, like the pseudo energy, we could compare with the equivalent deviational distribution, energy conserved deviational distribution function, and we would get a T log and T. So it's exactly the same we did before with F. So if we replace everything by F, like this term would go away and this term would go away because there was no equilibrium distribution to subtract from. So from the F, that's how we found this temperature and the local temperature. Now we are finding it for the deviational particle. So we have to subtract this equilibrium part as well. Okay, so the next comes this deviational algorithm. The scattering step, like in the deviational like formulation algorithm. In the scattering step, we would make this term go to 0. And again, we would solve this equation, and then you would find the probability of a phonon bundle to scatter with this would be P of omega Pi Tj 1 minus exponential delta T this term. So you could actually solve this equation to get this probability distribution function. So basically, if I assume this to be, let's say, some L of ED, and if you have to integrate this step, so let's do it a little bit so that you kind of get the idea. Del ED by del T. And let's assume there is some function. So if we assume this to be constant between T and delta T, so that's the assumption we are going to be making. So assume constant between T and T plus delta T. So you could integrate this equation directly. So after integration, like, so this, as you could think already, this ED would come below, like then there would be logarithmic term, dt would go there. So this ED at next time T plus delta T would be E of D T plus this L ED, which we have assumed to be constant within this time interval, E of D at time T. And then there would be this 1 minus exponential of minus delta T divided by tau of omega P times T. So exactly that's where this probability comes from. So once we are saying the scattering probability, like basically in the scattering step, how the deviational particle would look like. So that would depend on this function, this probability step. So that's what exactly we have written here. The probability with which each particle would scatter, and then we could draw a probability random number check with this p function whether the particle would scatter or not. Okay, so once we have found the probability, and let's say the particle now would scatter, like now it is going to go through the scattering. So then we could selected bundle, then we could replace it by the properties drawn from this distribution. So we would take now this distribution. So the new particle after scattering, so the 3 phonon scattering has happened. So after that scattering, the particle would be drawn from this distribution. So E log minus E equilibrium divided by tau. So if you expand that term, so E log is this function of T log, which we found it in previous slide. And the equilibrium just depends on the T equilibrium we had taken. So we would use this new distribution to draw our particle after the scattering step. So just to summarize, like we initialize the particle, like draw its phonon frequency in like wave vector direction and number of phonons and everything. We let it drift. So the particle, let's say, originated from maybe this cell. We let it drift. After this cell, we would check whether it's going to scatter or not. If it's going to scatter, we would redraw the particle from this new distribution. First, we would calculate T log in this cell. So we have to propagate all the particles simultaneously. And once we get the T-log, then we could say, okay, whether the particle would scatter or not by drawing the random number. And if it's going to scatter, then we are going to redraw the particle from this function which contains this tau term on the denominator. So basically d of omega E log minus E equilibrium divided by tau. Okay, I think we would take 10-15 minutes break now, and we would continue right after that.